good Sabbath afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us once again. For those of you who are watching for the first time and do not know who we are Edward and Debbie Smith. We are certified family life educators, and we are delighted to be the family life coordinators at Koto, Church of the Oranges in Orange, New Jersey. Sure. And every Saturday afternoon at 3, you can catch us right here on Facebook Live as we share topics as they relate to families and relationships. And this week, we are excited, over the moon, delighted, happy to have some very special guests with us. We were fortunate enough to present on the same platform with this couple. We've been following them for a really long time, and we are happy to call them colleagues and friends.
Absolutely.
We know that they're going to bless you real good on today. So I'm going to read their bio, and then we're going to get into this good dialogue that we have for you. So Sonia is a licensed clinical social worker and has been practicing for 30 years. She looks like she's only 30, y'all.
I know.
But that's another topic. She is a graduate from Oakwood University and Columbia University. She has worked in the capacities of school social worker for incarcerated youth, social worker for the elderly, and has owned and operated 2 teen mothers group homes. She currently is the owner of the Marriage Menders, LLC, providing individual marriage and family counseling. Her husband, Derek, joins her in marriage counseling, giving a husband/male perspective. His story of surviving abuse as a child, along with his law enforcement experience, adds a unique blend to the counseling experience. They have been married for 24 years and have 4 children and 2 grandchildren. They have traveled nationally and internationally, conducting workshops and seminars for youth, singles, families, and married couples. We are delighted to have Derek and Sonia with us, and they are the Marriage Menders. Yes. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Ed and Debbie. Yes. Nice to see you guys. Thank you for allowing us to be part of your forum today.
You're welcome. I mean, we're privileged to have you guys here. You are just a couple that we admire and have so much respect for. So we're just happy for what you're going to pour into our folks on today. So before we even get into the topic, why the Marriage Menders?
She came out the gate with that one.
Yeah. What's going on with that name? Why the Marriage Menders?
Oh, wow.
We were once in a place where our marriage needed mending.
Right.
And once we understood what the mending process was, we wanted to give a name that reflected our own experience, but also when someone heard it, they knew that there was help for their own marriage too.
Awesome. Love it. And just for those of you who are watching, we are they're the Menders, we're the Smiths, and so together we're the Smenders.
Yep.
So
that's our love name for each other. The Smenders.
Yes. And so today you wanted to talk to us and talk to our listeners about emptying our emotional cup as a family. And it's such a fitting topic. This is absolutely the time to talk about it. A lot of us individually, our cups are overflowing, but as families as well. And so we can't wait to get into the meat of that topic. So why don't you go ahead and tell us why you chose that particular topic?
Right. Life is busy. Life was busy before 2020. And the things that took place prior to 2020 didn't go anywhere.
Right.
We entered into 2020 with a new experience, which means that there's things that have taken place in our lives that go into our cup. And so our cup represents us, and our cup represents us and what goes inside the cup. And so our cups are full. You know, we have Sonia's father passed last year in August, full cup. We care for her. Sonia's mom who has dementia and she has MS, full cup. What we do as a practice, and our other family members, and you know, our daughter who graduated from Oakwood, but now she's stuck here, not sure what's going to happen and the feelings that come with that. We have a 16-year-old and an 11-year-old, full cups. And so a friend who is in the hospital and it doesn't look good at this very moment as we speak, a full cup. So, and that's just to name a few. I came from one part of Georgia and I got here in another part of Georgia. It was a lot, traffic, full cup. So the cup represents all the things that go inside, not just for us individually, but for us as a couple, and then for us as a family. So, and not just my cup, Sonia has her own cup, and our 4 children have their own cup. So now you have a conglomerate of people who have full cups.
And what's inside the cups are typically the emotions that come from the experiences we're dealing with. And sometimes the emotions are hard to name. And if we're not able to identify them, then they come out in different ways, and sometimes not the healthiest ways. So we thought that this would be a good topic because we figured we're not the only ones that have full cups. Now, the trick to the cup, the emotional cup, is how to empty it. And I'm sure we'll get into that, you know, as we talk, but we have to empty our emotional cups regularly. Otherwise it spills out and the people that shouldn't get it, get it.
Right.
Well, you know, and you know, so that leads right into my first question. How do we empty our emotional cups? And how often should we empty those cups?
Good question. Well, we try every day in real time. And some days our cups aren't as full as others. You know, we kind of were coasting along with a semi-full cup, and then our good friend got COVID, and now he's on a respirator and not doing well, and the cup just went all the way up. Like, you know, so then we had to talk about how do we empty that part of our cup. And so we did a prayer vigil for him in front of the hospital on Tuesday night. That was part of us emptying our cups to God.
Right.
You know, and God is actually the receiver of the contents of our cups. So we didn't know what else we could do. So that's what we did. And we felt lighter on our way back home. So to answer your question, it's really pouring out the emotions that we feel about situations, some that we can control and some that we can't control, to each other and to God. And in moments that we realize that we're not going to do well if we don't do it. So sometimes we can go weeks, sometimes we can go days, sometimes we can't go minutes. It just depends on the content.
I think also we have to say we have a full cup. I think the acknowledgement of my cup is full. And once you're able to acknowledge it, then you're able to talk about what to do or how to prevent it.
Yeah. And so that's like common lingo in our household, you know, like I got a full cup today. And that just means, you know, handle with kid gloves, be a little bit gentler, be a little bit more attentive.
Don't add anything else on my honey-do list. Slow it down.
Yeah. True. Like when Derek says he has a full cup, I take that seriously. Like, cause he doesn't say it often. So when he says it, then I'm checking the kids, I'm checking my mom, I'm checking the dog. You know, I'm like, everybody give daddy some breathing room. Let him empty his cup. Right?
It's gonna pop off.
And I really think that is so important, because oftentimes when we talk about our full cup, we are talking about you know, our stress level sometimes, right? And our emotional level and stuff. And you know, our spouse have to be very careful not to minimize that. You understand me? Don't dictate to me that my cup is not full.
That's right.
You know, it is half. Don't minimize it. It is my stress. It is my emotions.
That's
it
right.
is my cup. So, you know, accept what I'm saying to you as, you know, as the fact.
Yes.
You know, my cup is full, you know, and respect that. And, you know, and let's talk about how can we empty that cup.
That's a really good point, Ed, because one of the things that we say about our emotions is that they're not debatable. And that's why we tell people, find your feeling, because if you share the definition of your feeling, if you share the facts of your feeling, people are going to debate that. But if you actually share the feeling word, it's not debatable. And that's what breeds empathy and compassion. So you can't tell someone you don't feel that way, because it's theirs. And so that helps really when we're talking about the content of our emotional cup. We talk about feelings. That really helps reduce that combative type of or that the tendency to minimize, like you said, you know.
Is there ever a time when it might not be appropriate to share that your cup is full? So what if your spouse's cup is full and now, you know, that person is on edge because they have a million things, and now here you come, your cup is full, you want to be handled with kid gloves, but your spouse needs to be handled with kid gloves. Like, how do you balance that so that you're not canceling one another out and now nobody's getting what they need?
We call that the battle of the needs. Well, so here's some people are not going to necessarily agree with this philosophy, but in mending our marriage, in part of our journey, one thing that God showed me as a wife was that he put emotions in us so that we could also understand the emotions of our husband. He knew that we would grow up in a society where we meaning the female gender, would be more inclined to be encouraged to express emotionally. He put more emotional hormones inside the woman. There's just so many different aspects of the woman's makeup that tells us that we are more comfortable expressing and identifying emotions than men. Case in point, when we have marriage sessions and we ask a husband before they get comfortable with identifying feelings and emotions, 9 times out of 10, when we ask a husband how he feels, the wife blurts out the answer before he could even think of it. Right? And most of the time he hasn't thought of it. Right? So, I mean, God has continually shown us that we're a lot more comfortable and socialized to emote. So with that said, when both of our cups are full, I really do believe that my role emotionally is to help Derek figure out how to navigate his emotions, even though my cup might be full, because there is really only one helper in a marriage. I mean, we could support each other, we're partners, but in the eyes of God, he created a helper and he made that the woman. And oftentimes I think we forget that, because everyone's so busy vying for what they want and what they need. But when we get to the battle of the needs, I ask God to show me how to help Derek and hold my cup while I help Derek. And I promise you, it comes back around for me. Because once I'm able to see about him, he sees about me past what I even thought or expected. So it's definitely a reciprocation, but who moves first? It would be the wife. That's my take.
Wow. Okay. And it's funny that you say that it would be the wife who moves first, because in my opinion, I would think that the husband is the one that should move first, because the Bible talking about that sacrificial behavior, when the Bible talks about, loving your spouse unto death, you understand, and sacrificial behavior, because there are times that, both my wife and I cups are full to capacity, but because I, at times I'm so in tune to her and I realize that her cup is full, what I do, I press pause on my cup, so that we can.
You've arrived, Ed. You've arrived, and so has Derek.
Yeah,
I mean,
I was going to say, Ed, to your point, I have the same belief is when the husband is spiritually awake.
Right.
When he's awake, he's able to see his wife's cup is full and his cup is full, and he's going to cater to her cup. So it's like, you're doing it at the same time, but there's an awakening of what happens, so it doesn't become conflictual. Also, when you talk about our children and their cups being full, and our cups are being full at the same time. My daughter came down yesterday in the middle of me being entrenched with everything. And she says, Daddy, she had brought a new phone. Can you put the screen protector on the phone so it won't get any bubbles? I had to take a deep breath and I had to pause for like 5 seconds. And I said, sure. Because her cup was full. She's almost 16 and she has all the things that come with that. So I had to put my cup on pause, to your point, Ed, because I am the leader of this home and I dare not put my own needs before my children because I have to make sure that they're taken care of first.
Right. Absolutely. But I'll be honest, it's a trickle effect. It's a trickle effect because I think when a husband feels safe emptying his cup with his wife, he is able to see about everyone because he is the head of the household. But if you're talking about a high stress level day, Derek looks to me to help him with those emotions still. He's managed them, he's learned how, but he still looks to me to get the kids, babe, I can't today. Get the dog, whatever it is, he still looks to me to soothe that emotional part of his cup so that he can do the job of leading the household. He can be free to fix size phone and put the phone protector on it. He's available emotionally because really behind the scenes, he's poured out his cup to me already.
Wow. Yeah. And Derek, I love the point that you bring up about the children. Sometimes we feel that when the kids say that they're stressed, we're like, what are you stressed about? But these kids are stressed. Like they are carrying a lot. What do you say to a parent who feels that who minimizes their children's level of stress or how do we get through to them that if your child is saying that they're stressed, take some time and listen to what's happening because something is really going on.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we remind parents is that they've never had to be a teenager in this time. Right? That's one. I mean, our stressors did not look like this. We've never experienced an era in time like this before. So to even say that they don't see why their child is stressed, they have to really think about the fact that they've not walked in their shoes in this season. Our teenage years did not look like this. We were happy-go-lucky. We didn't know nothing about COVID and, staying inside and quarantine and masks and all this racial, unrest happening. I mean, we didn't have it. I at 16, I was living my best life. Right? So, we try to remind parents that they're not in the same era that we were in. And so they have to kind of take account into what some of the vices are that our youth are up against now. There's a lot of behind the scenes uncomfortable interactions that they're having because of social media. They get on social media and they're impacted by what they see and what they hear. And they don't necessarily tell us everything because we're so busy working. We're not on social media like that, but they're seeing things on social media that are impacting them emotionally. And, we didn't have all of those mediums back when we were, teenagers. We weren't exposed to the world like that. We had the 5 o'clock news and the 10 o'clock news, right? And then the TV shut down. That was it. So they're stimulated all day, every day, with things that don't necessarily show up in our house, but are happening outside of our house. And the first thing we try to remind parents is to identify the temperament of your child, because some kids just rolls off their back and they're good. And then some, they internalize that and it becomes depressing and dark and worrisome. There's some kids, they like a schedule. They are, they're creatures of habit. This whole staying in has thrown some of those kind of kids for a loop. They need to get up and go to school and go to their classes and go to their lockers. And some kids don't care. Some kids are happy to sleep in. It just depends on their temperament. So the stressors are very relative to the child.
Mm-hmm.
You know, our son was happy doing digital learning, and our other daughter was like, if I have to do Groundhog's Day in this house one more day, I'm gonna lose my mind. Because she's the social butterfly. She's like, I feel like it's the same day every day all over again.
Yeah.
You know, so it's really about knowing your child, and that's going to help them understand what the stressors actually are for each child, because the stressors don't look the same.
Right.
Spend time with them. Spend time with them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Take a minute, 10 minutes, and sit next to them. What are you watching? Sit next to them. I mean, depending on my child, 16-year-old, she's like, why are you sitting next to me? You know, you have to kind of figure out how to do that, but just spend time with them to find out what their world looks like.
Have dinner together.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Maybe not every single day, but there's so much we get from our kids when we're at the dinner table.
Absolutely.
You know? Yeah. Ask them how they feel. Make them give you feeling words.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And that's sometimes it's hard. They'll tell you what they think, but ask them how they feel. Put what you just said into a feeling word. And you'll be amazed at some of the feeling words that they'll give you. They're capable, very capable.
So how do you empty your emotional cup without bleeding on the other person? And the reason why I'm asking that, because sometimes, you know, I can be overwhelmed, and I want to empty my cup. But if I'm not careful, I can spew stuff out that comes over on my spouse or comes over on the children.
Yep.
And so instead of it becoming an emotional support, it became an emotional outburst. And so there are big arguments, fight within the home. How do you balance that?
That's a very, very good question. You want to put that up?
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to share the emotional cup so that our viewers can see it, because this is just an illustration of the metaphorical phrase, the emotional cup. This is a diagram. And so if you can see the cup, Derek is going to make it a little bit bigger. Inside the cup are those negative emotions, some of them, not all. Of course, we experience others, but we've got the anger and the bitterness in there. We've got the true guilt, because sometimes we act out and then we feel guilty because it came from some maladaptive response. We've got feeling condemnation and shame. We've got fear and insecurity. We've got anxiety, and we've got stress. And at the top, it says positive feelings, because there's no space for the positive feelings, right? So because the cup is so full, positive feelings can't fit. And so to your point, Ed, when you were describing spilling out, what happens is if we don't identify the feelings in the cup and process the emotions with those feelings, the experiences with those feelings, it'll come out in poor ways, like poor appetite, poor concentration, poor coping mechanisms, overworking, infidelity, pornography, all that kind of stuff for the adults too, depressed feelings, hot temper, impatient, quick temper, controlling behaviors, and then sometimes physical symptoms, and then the absence of positive emotions. So that's what will happen if we don't empty our cup. In addition to just taking it out on others, we'll find maladaptive behaviors to cope. To the left, we have some scriptures. They're called biblical antidotes. And so what we tell people is identify your feeling. There's always a word from God in his word about what to do with those feelings. So for example, for the anger and the bitterness, there's a scripture from Ephesians 4:31 and 32 that talks about being gentle and kind and forgiving. And then we've got one when you're feeling guilty. 1 John 1:9 and James 5:16 says to confess it. That's how you get it out of your cup. We talk about the truth sets us free. And that's coming from John 8:32. He who is free indeed, right? And Romans 8:1. And so all these scriptures are antidotes to those negative emotions in our cup. If there's nobody to talk to, you got God's word to help you through those emotions. Some people have to make phone calls to have a conversation about confessing or forgiving. Some people write letters. Some people go to counseling, but there's a way to do it. You know, even just a text message to the person that you felt guilty that you hurt. There's so many ways to do that, but the scriptures are the antidote for how to do that. So once the emotions are identified and dealt with through God's word or through some actionable behavior, then there's room for the positive emotions.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting about this diagram? If you don't empty your cup of all those negative things and more negative things go in, the cup is going to overflow.
Yes.
And the first thing that's going to come out of that cup are the positive feelings. And then you're left with all those negatives.
Yes.
So really, really important that we do empty from those negative things. Otherwise, it's going to wash away any positive that's in there. And now you're left with a completely negative cup.
And they won't, and yeah, the positive feelings can't stay long.
Yeah.
You know, and so we search for how to maintain those positive feelings. And in this season, it's really, really hard when you're hearing about so many people dying and being sick and, you know, police brutality. It's really hard to keep those positive feelings in there. And that's why we say now it's more important to have these conversations every day about, because every day something different shows up on the news that can actually take away the positive feelings that you woke up with. You wake up feeling great, you turn on the news and then you're like, man, you know? And so we say, process how you feel about that. And even in the processing, that's a cathartic, you know, experience. Just processing the emotions with somebody.
Yeah.
And that helps.
And it's the reason why it is so important that we have a supportive system. You know, we support each other as spouse. You know, and because, you know, if we don't do that, here it is that I'm seeing that I'm full to capacity. And if I don't have a spouse who can empathize, you know, and understand that and help me with that, you know, and vice versa, then, you know, it becomes very combative.
Yes.
You know, and before you know it, we are here for an entire week or sometimes for an entire day arguing about something and when all the dust is settled, you say to yourself, what is it exactly we were arguing about? You know? But it's because we were just emotional filled and we feel as though we had no support. And I think also it is very good for us to know when we're getting to that level.
Yes.
And so we give an indication to our spouse that I am getting to this level. And so we support each other. It is so important for support, you know, and this is the reason why I always say that, you know, household duty does not belong to the wife, as society quote unquote says that. You know, we support each other in everything, and so it helps alleviate the stress level, and so it takes our emotional cup much longer to get to the place where we want to explode.
Right. And when you can go long without it exploding, you know that you've been emptying your cup, you know, regularly. The other thing is that, you know, this season in time with the quarantine has also caused people to have to see each other more than usual. And children are feeding off of the parental feelings, you know, the between their parents. They can feel it. They can feel when mom and dad aren't talking or getting along. And it does impact their emotional cup. So we often tell couples, you know, you think that you're coping with it by yourself, but you've got other eyes that can see and can feel. And it is a spiritual thing. We don't have to say a word to each other, and our kids can tell if we're in a good place or not.
Yeah,
absolutely.
For sure.
So we really need to be mindful of that.
Yeah. And this whole visual of the emotional cup reminds me of the love bank, you know, that we talk about and filling up your love bank. And sometimes we expect our spouse to be completely responsible for filling up our love bank. And I forget who I was listening to recently, and they were saying, you cannot depend only on your spouse to fill that emotional love bank. Sometimes, if you know that being around your family is what fills you, that's where you have to go. If you know that going out to lunch with your girlfriends is going to rejuvenate you,
yes,
do it. Because when you come back, your capacity to understand and empathize and sympathize has increased.
yes.
Whereas you neglect to do those things,
That's true.
your capacity is limited.
That's
you
right.
just can't. So don't just look to your spouse to fill that love bank. You have to get it from, other things, other activities, other people that can surround you with what you need.
Right. And
That's a good point.
That's
Very
a very
good
good point. And I was having a hard time dealing with the murder of George Floyd. And so I shared with Sonia, we talked a lot about it, our emotions, but I had to talk to another Black man. I just have to say, I had to talk to someone else. And I talked to my boy Cliff, and we talked, and there was some emotions. But to your point, my cup was being empty because I was able to verbalize my perspective from where I sit, and Cliff was able to verbalize his perspective from where he sat. And then it was cathartic. It was good. So,
and I saw the difference.
Yeah.
I saw the difference because Derek was in a dark place that first week.
Yeah. So your point is so valid to be able to, have other resources.
Very good point.
Other supporting mechanisms to do that.
Yeah, and to another point, I think that we have to be so careful as to how we make that balance, because I could be hanging out with my boys, and or my wife could be hanging out with her girls, and then you pour into each other so much, and so you got to a place where I call emotional climax. And so you climax, and so by the time you come home to your spouse, and so how was it? And so it's just close-ended question.
Okay.
Answer, yes, no, it was good, it was okay. And so simply because you have already reached to a stage of climaxing when you were hanging out with your friends and stuff. And so while that is good, but we have to be very careful as to have that balance, because you can't come to a climax with your friend and then coming home and just totally shut down.
That's a good point. And and that's to us, that's the fluidity of intimacy, is being able to be fluid with your spouse in all aspects of your other relationships, because he or she is impacted by them for the good or for or for the not good. So being able to be fluid and share. I have a Zoom that I do with my girlfriends from high school. I went to high school in Barbados. So I have friends that are in Barbados that are dealing with COVID. And then I have my friends in New York. Some of my girlfriends from high school are in New York. And between New York, Barbados, and Georgia, we get on the line and we just laughing and cracking up, reminding ourselves of stuff we did when we were in high school. And then when I get off the Zoom, I'm quick to share some highlights with Derek about who said what and what I was cracking up at. And that's what we call the fluidity of intimacy. So you had an intimate moment with your girlfriends from high school, but then it's fluid. It flows right into the conversation of your marriage. And that's how you keep the balance you're talking about.
Yes.
And it's being able to share that.
Yeah, such good points, such good points. And so, so we're talking about emptying your emotional cup individually, as a family, and then what does that look like as a church family? Because right now we're in these virtual spaces, but eventually we're going to be back into our physical buildings. We're going to, be back together again. How do you think that looks as a church?
Oh, I'm so glad you said that, because I was watching our former pastor from Community Praise Center, And he was saying, well, he's the associate pastor. His name is Garrett Hayes. He's been really doing a good job of keeping the virtual services going. And he said, you know, church as we know it will never be the same once we come back together, and it shouldn't be the same. And he was talking about church being a house of prayer and praise, but how we do so much more when we go to church besides the praying and the praising, right? There's always all these other preliminary things that happen. And so he goes, and as he was speaking it, I said, boy, I hope that when we do come back together as a body of believers, that we could actually do that vision, which was we do more testimonies and we do more praising. And it's not as formal with the order of services. Because what happens is it's been taken away from the time to praise and the times to testify. And, you know, and the testimonies that people have to share when we come back are going to be profound. So we can't go back to business as usual. We would be doing a disservice to worshiping our God, and we would be doing a disservice to each other, because testimonies is a form of emptying our cup.
Wow.
So I'm so glad you said that, asked that question, because our hope is that the pastors and the church and the body of Christ and all the planners and believers will know we can't go back to an order of service the way that it's been. There's no way we can survive this season and just go back to business as usual.
Wow, such a good point. I hope our pastors are listening.
I hope so. I hope so.
Going back to church, there are so many cups that need to be emptied and refilled, you know, and we can only do that as we support each other, as we empathize with each other in some cases, sympathize with each other, and you know, and you know, I should not be able to pour into you based on how I think that you need to be poured into, but I need to first understand your need and pour into you based on your need.
Right. And the way that church has been set up, we don't get to hear what those needs are. You would have to be sitting in the same pew or in front or behind to know that. You know?
And you know, that testimony piece, that most churches have removed from order of service because it takes up too much time. You know, we're on a time clock. And a lot of the response has been, well, come to Wednesday evening prayer meeting. That's where we do testimony. But I think there's something missing when we're all together on, you know, worshiping as one big family. When you hear those testimonies, it does something to you.
It does.
You know, I hope that when we go back, like you said, it's not just back to announcements and, you know, this regimented way of worshiping, but that we can really be free and able to pour out our praise, like literally pour out our praise to him and celebrate the fact that we're back together, that we're still here. Folks are gonna be missing, right? Some folks are going to be missing.
Right.
So that's really a very good point, that the power of that testimony is a way of emptying our cup. And
it's going to prepare us for what's to come. If we become more comfortable now being transparent and sharing what we're struggling with and what we've overcome, because Revelation 12 tells us that people are going to be overcome only by two things: the blood of the Lamb, the death of Jesus Christ, and the word of our testimony. Those are the two things that people are going to be overcome by. Then that needs to definitely be considered when we go back into the sanctuary, because I think that we're not yet finished with experiencing some hardships and some hard times that are coming based on what we understand prophecy to tell us. This is the best part right here. So if we are to give our testimony and to help others along with their struggle now, how are we going to do it later?
So we're still talking about these our emotional cup, is there a way, if the answer is yes, is there a way that we can manage the emotion, the amount of emotions that goes into our cup? And if we can manage that, how do we do that? What should that look like?
Well, I think, every experience evokes a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about managing our emotional cup, you first have to give merit to the experiences.
That's good.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And some experiences cause us to have negative emotions that go in that cup. And then some experiences cause us to have good emotions that go in that cup. But when we have an experience, we need to give it a little bit more credibility. We need to be able to say, I had an experience today in the grocery store, and it was a positive experience. A Caucasian lady helped put my groceries on the belt because it was a crowded belt and I was on the other side of my shopping cart, and I was going to have to come back around and put that side of the groceries on. And she did that. And and I had to identify. Initially, I'm going to be honest with you, I was annoyed that she was touching my groceries. Right? Because I'm germaphobe and I had my gloves on. She didn't. But then I had to, so I'm working through my experience in real time, right? Mm-hmm. So I went from being annoyed to being ashamed that I was annoyed. And then I went from being ashamed that I was annoyed to being thankful that we are still in a place where we can still be kind to each other. Yeah. Even though we have a different race. So I had to process each emotion of that experience so that by the time it ended up in my cup, hopefully it was a positive one.
Yeah. Wow.
Right? So that's an example, Ed, of how to manage our emotions.
It's the scripture that says, take every thought into captivity under the obedience of God. So it really requires a spiritual understanding of your mind and what you think, and then taking captive of what you're thinking. And that's what you did.
Yeah, I had to do that.
Yeah, that's deep.
Yeah, I had to do that.
You don't like people touching you.
I don't. I have.
That's a testimony in itself.
And I went through 3 emotions: annoyance, shame, and gratefulness.
And gratefulness.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because I'm a big believer in processing, right? So Ahmaud Arbery happened and George Floyd happened, and in the workspace, when you have these virtual meetings, everyone is looking at you and they want to know, what are you thinking and how are you feeling, right? And my thing was, I'm still processing because yes, I can spew out my emotions and I can spew out how I'm feeling in the moment. But what tends to happen is once the words come out of my mouth, I can't take them back. Right. Now you're gonna look at me a certain way. And I've told even, my Caucasian colleagues, you need to process too, because you're so eager to kind of placate me and, tell me how sorry you are and pour out your emotions. The more you talk, though, the more you run the risk of saying something that you can't walk back from. That's then going to shape how I view you. And so we all need to come into this place where we are processing those emotions before we even open our mouth and speak. I think it's the same thing in the family, in the home, with husband and wife. We can't just blurt out those initial thoughts that come to our mind. Even with our children, they may do something or say something and we just want to go at them in that moment. But we have to begin to pause and not just open our mouth, because again, once it comes out, even when you apologize 1,000,000 times, you cannot take it back. The pain is inflicted. Those words are going to ring in the ears and continue to ring in the ears even after the apology. So it is a skill to learn how to not respond immediately. And I wish there was maybe there is a class on it, how to process your emotions in a healthy way before speaking, because I think that's what gets a lot of us into trouble.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point.
But how, let me ask you guys, how do we do that though? Because most men, in my opinion, are processors, right? We our spouse come to us and, babe, can you and so we're processing. But most of the time, this female wants an answer now. You understand me? But we're still processing. How do we do that without creating friction between us? Me, I can tell my wife, give me a few minutes or give me a day. You understand me? Most times when my wife comes to me with anything, I process real quick and boom. And I'm giving you the answer. But most men are not like that. They need some time to process. But the longer they take is the more problem they get into with their spouse, simply because the spouse feel as though now you're ignoring me, or now you're stonewalling. How do we balance that?
Right. To your point, you have to say it. The man has to be at a point in his vocabulary at some point in time to say the words "I'm processing," instead of, at some point he has to be able to say, "Honey, I have to process this information, and give me some time." You have to put a time limit on it. You just can't say 3 days or 2 days. Absolutely. Give me some time, maybe in an hour or so. I'll come back to you with my thoughts on it.
You do that all the time.
Every day.
Derek does it all the time.
Because see, I understand, like you said, I understand
He's been skilled at that.
How important it is to her. So even though it's important for me to process, but it's important for her to be able to get the information so she can process the information. So it's communicating and saying, I'm processing, give me a couple hours and I'll get back to you with what my thoughts are.
It's kind of like a waltz dance, because I am an external processor. He, like you said, Ed, he's an internal processor. And when you were describing, Debbie, that everybody needs to learn how to process internally before they speak, I had to learn how to process internally before I spoke, because my temperament is inclined to process in real time out loud.
Yeah.
And then that impacts the internal person who's trying to process, because they really can't respond yet. And like you said, it causes a conflict, because now you're not responding, even though I'm requiring a response.
Right.
So one of the things that Derek and I have had to do, and we teach people to do, is identify if you're the one that has to speed up in your processing, or if you're the one that has to slow down in it. And be honest about that.
Yeah, yeah.
So Derek had to speed up in his, I have to slow down in mine, and then we meet in the middle.
Yeah.
And it is a skill. You have to practice that thing, okay? Because I got about 12 things right now that I haven't told Derek that I want to that I have held on to, because I know that he doesn't have the capacity right now.
We did it yesterday in the bathroom.
Yes.
Someone was giving me information, and I was good for the first 15 seconds. But then she went into fourth gear, and I put my head down and I rubbed my forehead, and then she recognized that I was getting overwhelmed. And I said, honey, I'm overwhelmed with the information.
Right.
Okay. So, and then we talked about it, but
it doesn't do me a world of good giving it to him if he's not ready to receive it.
Right.
Because, we want the continuation of the dialogue and some feedback or some thoughts about it. And you're not going to get it from someone if you're imposing it too soon.
Yeah.
So I'm better off giving it to him later tonight when he's downloaded.
Yeah.
And then he can really engage me properly.
Yeah. One of the things, Derek, vocabulary. I think some of us need to increase our vocabulary, right? Learn how to put things into words. Some of us just lack it. We just don't say what you mean, and say how you feel, and say what you're thinking, and say what you're going through. I think, we choose to share certain things.
Yes.
But other things we hold on to.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
I can't help you in this area if you're not vocalizing and telling me what it is that you're going through, what it is that you need. And I think it does become an issue in a lot of marriages because at one spouse, we know something's going on. We ask you what's going on, but there are certain areas that you're still not ready to talk about. And it's been months, it's been years. We're waiting for you to share that you're going through this thing so we can help you, but we can't help you. You're not asking for help. Use your vocabulary.
I love that you said that.
Then again, I'm gonna say something else. So sometimes it's not about vocabularies. It's just about I need to be in a headspace where I'm comfortable enough to say it, where it's not going to create friction. I give you an example. About 2 weeks ago, I was in a very pensive mode. She recognized it and she says to me, "Babe, what is the matter?" And I said to her, "I will let you know when I process it. When I'm in a different place, when I'm in a better place, I will let you know." That was 2 weeks ago. I just let her know what that was today.
Okay.
And the reason for that is now I can talk about this thing without anger, without blaming, without this is how I feel. You understand? And so we talk about it from that place, and now we could have spent 2-3 hours and talking about the same thing, and I would be good because I was no longer angry. Okay. I was no longer pensive. I was no longer. Now, if I had approached her at a time when I was feeling, it would have been a different story. You understand me? So again, our aim and objective is not to hurt each other, right? Or is not to bleed on each other with our emotional cup or overflow. So now I need to be in a place, we need to be in a place where we can speak our truth without disrespect, without blame, without anger, or any of those things.
Well, and you're absolutely right, Ed. I really want to say, I believe that that's the exception and not the rule to most couples, though, and to most people, because for some reason we're uncomfortable sharing those secret parts of our hearts, even with our closest people, like our husbands and wives and our parents and our friends. And so I was just telling Derek, I think that as a people, we had to camouflage our pain through the years, and we still continue to cope that way when we don't have to. Because of slavery, we've had to camouflage our pain. So when you ask somebody how they're doing, everyone feels like they have to show up and be okay.
Right.
And they're not okay, and to your point, then you can't get help. Now in an intimate marriage, like in an intimate relationship like marriage, like you did, and you held on to it, you processed it. I think that that's healthy. And I think but that's the exception, right? Because we're talking about people that have long-standing hurts and issues, and they've been in marriages for years and they still won't speak to it. And they show up and they say that they're okay, but it's showing up in withdrawal. It's showing up in shutting down. It's shutting up in avoidance. It's shutting up and it's showing up in being impatient. It's showing up in all those different behaviors that we showed in the emotional cup. And I think that they don't know the words to say, because and it doesn't feel safe, and it's just like you teach a toddler, not equating a grown adult to a toddler, but if you teach a toddler to walk, after a while, they don't need your help walking. They just start walking and then they can run. And I think verbally, some of us have to do the same thing. We have to teach each other how to talk so that it's safe to talk some more and to talk some more. But we got to get out of this mindset that, oh, we're okay. We're not okay. Yeah. It's reflecting in the relationship, Yeah. And that's what we call a barrier to emptying our cup. Is not knowing how to find the words to say.
Yeah. We were on a platform earlier this week, and we were talking about becoming that good thing in marriage. And one of the viewers, very interactive and engaging, and typed in some questions like, you know, what do you do when you repeatedly ask your husband what's wrong? You know something's wrong, and you ask over and over and over again, and they're just not willing to share. And we get that a lot when we're doing sessions with couples. Like, one couple is trying and want to talk, and the other one has just shut down. And we find that there's so many couples that are going through life just that way, you know, just not engaged, just detached. And a lot of times, Derek, it's the male, you know, it's the man. He doesn't want to participate in you know, a married couples club, or doesn't want to go to counseling, or you know, the wife is saying what's wrong and he's not answering. How do we move? You know, you're in a marriage. You don't want to get out of your marriage. You love your spouse, but you have just hit a brick wall. They're not opening up. They don't want to go to counseling. You've prayed about it. How do you? And I feel like we keep giving the same answer, right? You know, pray about it, keep trying. But at some point, there has to be more, something else.
Yes.
Would do.
Yes.
And I'm going to Derek because I know that, first of all, he has a special heart for men and husbands. And I think he might have some insight into how do you reach the heart of a man who has probably been hurt so much, marginalized so much, neglected so much that even when he's being loved, he can't receive it.
That was Derek.
Yeah.
That was Derek. And I remember having to say to him, I stopped asking him what was wrong.
I was going to say that too.
Okay. Because
when you ask the question, what's wrong, it's implying that that something's wrong with me.
Right.
Even though I'm not saying anything.
Which causes you to shut down even more.
It perpetuates what I've been feeling for years. So the question has to be a different kind of question.
Wow.
It's like there's a scene in I, Robot.
I was going to say that one.
Will Smith, you know, the professor dies and he comes back in a hologram, and Will Smith is trying to investigate his murder. So he asks the question to the professor who's in a hologram, Professor, who killed you? Who did this? And the professor's response is, in order to get the right answer, you have to ask the right question. And I believe, in my experience, that every man wants to hear the question.
Yep.
Because they've heard what's wrong when they fall down when they were 10. What's wrong? Don't worry about it. You better not cry. So he's not able to say what's wrong.
Right.
They conditioned all his life not to answer that question.
Right.
Because he got beat. He got told that you're not. You know, men don't share that. So he's conditioned to hear that question. So the question has to be a different question.
And the question is, tell me your story.
Right.
That's so good. Because, you know, during that same session, we talked about the wife being her husband's greatest cheerleader. You know, and my husband talked about, you know, when you're a little boy and your mom clapped for you, every little milestone, you know, you received applause. And the same woman came back and she said, I don't think anyone has ever cheered for this man.
Right. Right.
So now she's trying to be his cheerleader, and he can't receive it. He's never had anyone do that for him. So, some of us have some really deep-seated issues going back to boyhood and girlhood, and yet here we are in these marriages, and we're expected to show up and you know, be these husbands and these wives and these good things, and we have no idea. We want to do it, we really do, but we just don't know how.
Right.
You have to go back to the beginning. That's
you got to hear the story
that we would say, because most couples, they're married for so many years, they know what happened based on them telling the story, but you have to go back and say, tell me how you felt when your dad ignored you or when your mom left you. That's going to allow that man to feel safe enough, one, that you care about my story, two, that, oh, I'm able to share how I feel. And then that's going to open up more conversation. So then at some point he's going to say, wow, there's other men like me. So I will go to a couple's support group or a seminar or retreat, or I will share how I feel, because now it's safe, because you're now the first person. Sonia was the first person that ever said to me, tell me how it felt when your dad did that to you. The first person.
Wow.
So when she said that, and then after some time, it felt safe for me to say, it just opened up a whole, it just opened up a whole new experience for me.
You know, a lot of us are involved in relationships while being broken, right? And it makes the process of building that foundation more difficult when you're trying to build it from a broken place,
right?
And so one of the first steps, I think, is to recognize that you're broken, right? And seek that help, because again, if you don't seek that help, you will forever trying to build your marriage from a broken place, and it creates more emotional cups, you know, you know, and stuff like that in a marital relationship. So, you know, my favorite saying is, you know, unlearn some things and relearn new things. Unlearn some things. It is okay. You know, I'm going to be 60 years of age in a couple of months, you know, and, you know, and at this age, I am still unlearning, because there's a lot of things about me that does not fit very well in my current marital relationship in my family. So I have to unlearn those things and relearn some new things. You know, fit those things. When we first met you, you talk about writing your story. You know, this is our story, and I can only write my story. Well, we can only write our story as we put pen to the paper, and that story is just personal to us, you know. And so I can't take what I learned, you know, 20 years ago and try to fit it into my current relationship if it's not going to fit. I have to unlearn that and relearn new things.
Yeah, that's excellent. You're absolutely right. And we use that same verbiage to unlearn, you know. And there's a conversation that comes up all the time about marriage and what is the purpose of marriage. And Derek and I often reference 1 John 4:18 that says, there is no fear in love, because perfect love casteth out all fear. Most of the time there's marital issues is because there's a fear of some kind. And so we tell people marriage is the relationship that teaches you how to perfect love. Right? Because God created man after his own image, and God is love. And so he's used the relationship of marriage to teach us how to perfect love, which means that we have to eliminate the fear.
Yeah.
And then in that process, as a husband or wife, whoever the one that might be broken or both are broken, they have to recognize what it is they are afraid of. What fear did they bring into the marriage? And now remember the conversation that Derek is talking about. I didn't even have the same prolific aha moment about 1 John 4:18 at that time. I just knew that I loved him. And I just knew that there was nothing that he was going to say to me that was going to stop me from loving him. And the Holy Spirit told me, why don't you just tell him that? And so I said, there is nothing you've done, and there's nothing that was done to you that's going to stop me from loving you if you tell it to me.
Wow.
That's good.
And that was the perfect love casting out all fear process. And so, you know, couples are listening, family members are listening. Most of the barrier to the perfect love that God has given us is fear.
Yeah.
And we've got to identify what that fear looks like. In some people, it's rejection. In some people, it's abandonment. In some people, it's judgment. In some people, it's shame. You got to just identify, what does this person fear the most, and speak to it. That's how you eradicate it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. And you know what I love about this marriage thing that God created? I think that we can come into a marriage as whole as we think we are, as healed, as healthy as we think we are. But not until we get into that thing with that person that God reveals some broken places
What?
that only that person can pray you through.
Yes.
That is the beauty of marriage
Yes.
journey. God is just wise and he's good, and
Yes.
yes.
Yes. And you know what, as you say that, Debbie, the question is, what do we do with the awakening of our brokenness? You know, because here sometimes, I know we got married and I didn't think I had any issues. I thought that my stuff was good, you know. I was like, my stuff don't stink, baby. That's, you got the issue.
Look at Derek. Derek, Lord.
Right? And then God was just like, no, see,
Let me show you.
You have yet to understand what's inside of you, stopping you from being the kind of wife I was intending for you to be.
Come on.
Yeah.
And it was when I had to take a look in the mirror at myself, I realized there were some broken pieces that were preventing me from being the wife that God intended for us to be. Nice. And it was fear.
Yeah.
Fear of not being good enough. Fear of not being adequate, you know, fear of just, you know, not being able to be the wife that he needed. So we all have some kind of fear.
Yes, all of us.
Of some kind. Fear that he's not going to give me the need of security, which is what most wives need in marriage, is a relationship in perfect harmony that's free from harm. That's what security is. Yeah. And so we all have our coping mechanisms when we're afraid.
Yeah, beautiful. So believe it or not, we've hit an hour.
Wow. That went fast.
It did. So in 30 seconds, Derek, tell us why emptying our emotional cup is so important, vital to the health of a relationship.
Because if you don't, it's going to impact your future. It's just going to impact your dreams and your visions and the things that you really desire to do, because you still have your cup that's full. And if you don't empty your cup, then everything that you're striving to do, that you want to do, is just going to impact your children, your wife, your grandchildren, your finances, your spiritual, your church. All those things will be impacted if you don't empty your cup.
Wow.
And not just the health of the marriage, but your own medical and physical health. Because when you keep those emotions inside, they manifest into medical conditions.
Beautiful.
And not only that, I'm just thinking out loud that, you know, you keep those things inside, you won't have room for new things.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Beautiful. Thank you, Menders. Thank you. This is so good. We touched on so many different topics. And Derek, you know, we just need to bring you back to talk to men.
Right.
I know that's your heart, you know, that's something that you love. And so we definitely bring you back just
I would love to.
And the Menders are going to be joining us, Koto. We're bringing them live and in person, Koto, and we cannot wait.
I can't wait.
This was just a little taste.
Little taste. When we're all back from the quarantine, we will be there in person. We can't wait.
Yes. It's gonna be incredible for a whole weekend. You know, it's just gonna be really, really good. So we want to thank you guys for spending this hour with us. We want to thank our viewers for just joining us once more. Don't forget, you can reach us via email, family@kotosda.org. We want to hear from you, ask your questions, share your comments, and be sure to join us here again next week at 3 p.m. Same time, same place. Menders, we love you. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you so much for having us. You guys continue.
Let's enjoy the rest of your week, guys. We appreciate you.
Blessings to you guys. We love you.
Love you too.
Love you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Go ahead.